Hello everyone, welcome to another edition of the 4LadsHadADream podcast. My name is Stevie Clifford and joining us as usual is Chief Sports Writer of the Glasgow Times and Herald Group. He is a co-host of the 4LadsHadADream podcast, Mr. Chris Jack. Chris, how are you?
Not too bad, Stevie. Another really interesting and a great guest to have on, so I'm looking forward to hearing what this guy's got to say.
Yeah, definitely. Very excited about this. Grown up, very much part of my early Rangers life was obviously the 9-year-old team and that successful period. And this guy was really one of the first kind of foreign stars that I would relate to and quickly become a favourite. He played for Rangers between 1990 and 1995. He won 5 league medals, 2 League Cup medals and a Scottish Cup medal. We are, of course, talking about Pieter Huistra. Chris, what do you remember about Pieter's time at Rangers?
Well, as you were rhyming off his achievements here, obviously somebody that came in at the start, or as 9-year-old, was really getting going, somebody that's part of a really successful Rangers side and also a really entertaining Rangers side. I was doing research on this the other day, looking up some of the goals and some of the games that Pieter scored and played in. Also somebody that's part of a really successful side and somebody that's also, again, just doing a bit of research on him. I didn't realise how far travelled he'd been during his coaching career. So looking forward to getting a wee bit of insight into some of the far-flung places that he's been. Also done a lot of work in his native Holland, but certainly been around the world in search of jobs and to expand his footballing horizons. So I think this will be another really good listen for the Rangers fans, and hopefully they really enjoy it.
Yeah, I think one of the great things about Pieter is that we haven't heard his story a lot. So I'm really looking forward to hearing what he's got to say, and obviously about his time at Rangers.
So that 90 to 95, we've also had a few guys on from that particular era. I talked about some of the great games and the league wins, the cup wins, and also the famous European nights as well. So interesting to get his perspective on it. And as you were saying, one of the first foreign guys in that squad as well. So we've heard the likes of Ian Ferguson and Bomber and got the kind of Scottish perspective. So interesting to hear how Pieter settled into that side and what part he felt he played in those really successful times.
So a warm welcome to Pieter Huistra. Pieter, thanks for joining us on the podcast.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me. It's nice to be here.
It's an absolute pleasure for us to talk to you. We were just mentioning there, you were part of an extremely successful Rangers side, so it's always nice to discuss these memories with you.
Yeah, I always consider myself lucky that I came to Rangers exactly in that period. So we had a great team. We had a very good camaraderie and of course, also we won a lot, so that's always a few good ingredients together.
So before we get to talk to you about your time at Rangers, I'd like to talk to you a wee bit about your early career and your early influences, and who were your heroes as you were young and started to become a professional footballer?
Now, for most of the Dutch boys at that moment who wanted to play and who were playing football, it was always Johan Cruyff. Johan Cruyff was the big leader in the 70s who brought Dutch football from nothing to a high standard. And they went even to the final of the World Cup twice in the 70s. And Johan Cruyff was the big instigator of that. And everybody wanted to be Cruyff. And so did I. And still, even as a coach, I really liked him. I really followed his principles. And still up to today, I use his insights. He was very important for the whole of Dutch football.
So he would be an early influence, and you would start at Groningen, and you would make the breakthrough at just 17. How was that for you? What are your memories of your time there?
No, my memories was that when I was 15, 16, I was really fanatic about training, about playing football. But in Holland at that time, when you went professional around 17, 18, it was possible to go to professional clubs, especially in the north of Holland, where I came from. Before that, it was all amateur clubs, but also at my amateur clubs, we had a very good team, a lot of players who were fanatic, who always played together. And from that, I always had a very intense period, and that resulted into the selection for FC Groningen. And first in the second team. I was by far the youngest when I was 16 when I came in that team, and most of the players were around 21, 22. But I had to move to another city. I have to move to another school. I lived with a landlady when I was 16. So it was a big move for me. But in that year, a lot happened. I made a very quick development, and 1 year later already I was selected for the first team, and already quickly made my debut as well for the first team. So everything at that time was very quick, very fast.
You would have a short spell there before you would go on to establish yourself at 20. What was the key to you making your name there, and who helped you most make the breakthrough and become established and make your name?
Yeah, I went to 20 after the serious ankle injury at Groningen. It took almost a year to recover from that, and then the new coach at Groningen said that I had to start on again with the second team. I didn't want to do. It was possible to go to Twente champions in Holland, but the most influential at that time, Kees Rijvers. He was also coach. He was a big name at Twente. He played at Twente when they were very successful, and now he was the coach, and he helped me a lot. He was the first coach that also played as a winger, so he helped tips. Very good insights in the game. I was there. I made a quick. We had a good team, and I made also a quick development there. And I reached the national team from Twente. We ended up 3 years in a row, number 3 in Holland. So we had a good team, and also a team that was very close together. What I later experienced at Rangers. A lot of camaraderie. Very friendly, but also very tough for places. So it was a great time at Twente. I learned a lot. And of course, if you make your debut in the national team, it's always very special.
Holland was something I wanted to ask you about just before we got on to talking about Rangers and your time there. You played with legendary figures for Holland like Gullit, Koeman, Rijkaard. That was an unbelievable team. People that I grew up watching, and the famous Van Basten volleys, and we grew up idolising these guys. And in the playground, you wanted to be, Ronald Koeman or Van Basten. Do you think that Holland team really should have went on and won major titles? And what was it like to be part of that?
It was great to be part of that. Of course, they won a major title in '88 by winning the European Championship. I was the first player after that championship, still in 1988, that came new to the team, because Arnold Muren in the European Championship was already 36, I think, when they won it. And so he said after the European Championship, okay, it's finished for me, a new player can come in. I was the first player to come in on that position. So it was a big honor for me to play in that team. And in the beginning, it was very special. Also there, it was hard, but also good, and I felt that they helped me to make my place there, and I had some good games in that team, and also on that note, I think I was interesting for other teams in Europe. I want to make a move from Twente, and then more or less accidentally, Rangers and Graham Souness came on my path, and it's a story in itself. But I came to Rangers. I started with a test period in Il Choco, and it was good. It was okay. And Souness asked me to come to Glasgow, and we signed a contract. And we're almost 4.5 years at Rangers, so it was very special. And I'm happy I made the move. Certainly, when I look back at my career, it was very good. It was nice. Very good time to be at the club and to feel the club, to feel the people who make the club. It was even now. I talk to you now, and I talk to many people, many supporters. It's one big family. When I lived in Indonesia, I was invited all kinds of supporters clubs in Asia to come around. I've been to Florida for the convention of the Rangers Supporters Clubs, America and Canada. So yeah, it's special to find out how big such a club is, how big Rangers is.
When you first joined up with that Rangers squad in that 1990, Peter, what were your first impressions of the squad and perhaps the differences between how Graham was going to do things at Ibrox and what you had experienced previously in Holland?
Yeah, I remember that the thing that struck me most was the intensity of the training, especially of the games. In Holland, whenever I trained at any club I was always the best runner of the team. But when I came at Rangers and we did some running, all of a sudden 4 or 5 players outrun me. So that said a lot, and that said a lot about the stamina, about the intensity they could produce, and that's also what I saw in the games. If you look at technique and tactics, it was not a lot different with Holland, but especially the intensity, the grit, the determination, that was certainly special in that team. That was one of the first things that struck me in whatever we did.
You have quite an eventful first season. Also, Graham leaves towards the end of the season. The team still see it out, and you managed to win the title. How was your relationship with Graham and also with Walter? And what were the key differences between how they operated?
Yeah, no, Graham was Mr. Souness, I have to say. Certainly at that time, he was very strong, big personality. Very dominant in the dressing room, I think in the whole club. Also the instigator of the revival of Rangers at that time, I'm sure. He did everything for the player, but he also expected everything from the player. And I think that was, it was a good thing. And that was, I think, the basis of the new growth of Rangers at that time. He brought in some big players from England, later, for instance, from Russia. They took risks, I think, to bring in these players, and he had especially as soon as I remember, he had a very simple but very good philosophy that he wanted, and that's what he said also against us. He wanted players who were hungry, players who didn't win or hadn't won that much. And when he had the feeling that the players got a little bit complacent, he sold them and got some new players who were hungry again. And I think that was a good formula. And I think that also, that's what you could feel. All the players were hungry. They wanted to win. Every game we wanted to win. Even if we were already champions, we still wanted to win the games. And that also, I think, was the secret at that time. Walter was different. Walter was a different personality. As soon as Walter was very clever, he knew the players. He was very good in communicating with, especially the key players. I think he built well on everything that Souness built up. He continued in a very good and clever way. And that also made for continued success. He showed it with all the cups and prizes, medals that he won in his time at Rangers.
Peter, sorry, Chris, I'm going to jump in. Peter, just to ask you, there's lots of famous stories. Ali McCoist will tell a very famous story about training when Graham Souness wiped out Ian Durrant, and Ian Durrant kind of challenged him, and he ended up, swinging a punch at him and things. Were you ever on the end of the famous Graham Souness hairdresser in the changing room?
I was in the beginning. One time I made a mistake that Souness came in. He told a few things, and then I didn't, because in the beginning it was difficult for me to understand everything clearly. So when Souness already was finished and he wanted to walk out of the dressing room, I tried to get his attention, and I didn't know exactly which words to use. So I said, hello, and he turned around and he said, what hello? it's Mister or it's Gaffer or it's whatever, but never call me hello. So okay, sorry, that's what I learned, and from then on was Gaffer, and it was okay. But it was the intensity also in which he brought it. It was, what's happening? Yes, okay. And we go on. But no, but my relationship with him was good. He brought me to the club. He gave me good contract. He played me and he respected me. So I felt that very strongly.
It says a lot about the quality, not only of that squad, but also of Walter as a manager. That Graham's departure didn't really have that big an impact. You obviously won the league that season, 91-92. You then go and win the double. Also, a key part of that season was the McCoist and Mark Heatley partnership. How did you find playing with those two guys? How highly, even in a European sense, did you rate them as a partnership and as individuals? Were they up there with the best in Europe at that time?
Yeah, I think so. They were very good together. They were completely different types, but I think that's what made the synergy between them. Of course, they had also got some good assistance from the sides. On the right-hand side at that time, we had first Mark Walters. Later, of course, he went away with Souness, but we had Trevor Stevens coming back, Gary Stevens. We had David Robertson on the left, Michalichenko, myself on the left. So they also had a lot of support from the sides, but they were very complementary towards each other. And I think that was that was the special thing. When I came in 1990, there was still the rivalry with the three when Maurice Johnson was also still there. And in the beginning, Hadley was out, and then Coisty was out. But in the end, when Morris went out, it was clear to see that Hadley McCoist was special, and that's why they stayed on also, and that's why Maurice Johnson left, and Duncan Ferguson, for instance, came in, but he also couldn't pierce through this duo of McCoist and Hadley. So they found each other. The team found them, and it was a good partnership, and that's how the whole team gelled together very quickly. That's what made it strong also.
We have been very fortunate to have likes of John Brown and Ian Ferguson on the podcast, and they speak so highly about the 92-93 season, both from a domestic point of view and also a European point of view. Was the European performances and how that season unfolded really special for you? You also scored a couple of goals in that run. And how much did you enjoy everything that Rangers achieved in that European camp?
I enjoyed that whole season. It was very special. Yeah, we had, I think, 44 games unbeaten run in that. We had some big games in that series, but everything felt like coming together that season. Even though we had some injuries because of the amount of games. When I looked a few months ago, when I looked at the lineup, for instance, for the Bruges away game, there was a lot of substitutes playing in that game, players who didn't normally play as a starter, but even in that game, we played good, and we played as a team. We played very strong, and the thing in that team was that whenever we started the game, we thought we could win. And if it was against Leeds, or it was against Dunfermline, or it was against Olympique Marseille, every time we started, we were in the dressing room, we went out, we felt, hey, today we can win this game, or we want to win this game. And that for me, if I still think about that team at that time, that was the most outstanding thought in my mind. I remember sometimes you have the feeling, especially as a left winger, you can step back a little bit. You can step to the sideline and you watch the game like a supporter. And when you watch it, you think, wow, what's happening here? And then you step in again, and you're in the middle of it. But I always had the feeling, even if we went 1-0 down, for instance, I saw the team react. I saw myself as a team member react, and they didn't play. We didn't play to make 1-1, but we played to make 2-1, 3-1 to win this game. And that feeling, that remembrance, that's very strong in my mind. And I saw the reaction always from the players and the pride. They didn't want. We're not here today to lose. Come on, let's go together. Boom, 2 gears up, and then we win it. That's what we did that season. It's very special. Yeah.
Sorry, Chris, I'm going to jump in here again and ask you. 92-93 was so special as a club. A lot of people my age, Chris, our era, will say that's the most special season we've seen. We came so close in Europe, and there was just the magnificent highs of Leeds home and away. And something I wanted to ask you about Leeds, we've had, obviously, as Chris mentioned, we've had guys like Ian Ferguson, John Brown, Dave McPherson talk to us about these nights. And they will tell us, from a Scottish point of view of how passionate it was and the whole Scotland-England thing. And Leeds didn't give us a chance. They said, we weren't going to be able to match them and things. For you, Peter, being Dutch and maybe being not as entwined as the Scottish boys were, did you feel that as well? And did it make you feel even more determined as being part of Rangers family and then being like, almost like the family's Scottish? Did you kind of side with the boys and really build you up to try and beat Leeds home and away? Did you get that, the kind of passion in the rivalry?
I got the passion. I felt it in the dressing room. I felt it in the build-up. I read it in some English papers that Leeds already thought that they would qualify already. They just had to play these 2 games, and then they would play the Champions League. And I remember that a few of these articles from papers in England also reached the dressing room at Rangers. So that was just what we needed as players. That was the right dose of challenge, of adrenaline, that we needed to show everybody, hey, that we are not walkovers, that we can beat this team, that we're a good team as well. And that helped a lot. There was a sort of doping for our team. Even when we did okay, we won in the first game. Still, some English papers thought that Leeds would easily turn it around at home. But in the run-up to the game, it was clear for me already that we would have a very good chance to go through.
One other thing I wanted to ask you about that season, Peter, was the League Cup semi against Celtic. You end up sent off after an altercation, shall we say, with Tom Boyd. Rangers, it all ends well for Rangers. Mark Heatley gets the goal and Rangers win. Can you talk us through the incident from your perspective, and what was the reaction like in the dressing room? Did you buy Big Mark a pint for bailing you out that day?
Yeah, it was not the most clever thing I ever did in the game, but it was not the first time. But every game, this Tommy Boyd, he tried to intimidate a little bit. Celtic knew they were not strong enough to beat us in a normal way, so they always tried to do something. And it happened already a game before that, and this time again he off the ball he gave me an elbow, and I still it was this small referee. I still see from I was angry, and in a rush I wanted to kick him, and I saw that Mr. What is his name? Doogie referee helped me with that one.
I can't remember who it was either.
No, okay, but at the moment I lashed out, I saw that he turned around. So I knew as well that it was not very clever at that moment. He gave me red, and he was right to give me the red card. But of course it was still in the first half, and it was not good for the team, so it was not very clever. But I was very relieved after the game that we still won, and that we went on to play the final. So,
Peter, the Rangers fans weren't angry with you that you'd done it. I think we were only upset that you'd missed them. So,
Yeah, that was due because the referee just at that time turned around. So I tried to stop, but no, the intention was clear, and it was a red card. So I couldn't say much, and maybe in hindsight I should have hit him, but didn't. Never clever to do anyway. But fortunately, they still won with 10 men, so it was very special. Yeah.
After the huge success of that season, Peter, the 93-94, Rangers only won the double. It seems strange to say when you only win the double, but was there a sense of frustration that you couldn't go and repeat the feats of the season before, both domestically and certainly in Europe?
No, I think I remember that especially the European game was a disappointment. Levski was not the best team, so we should have qualified through that. That was disappointing. For the rest, I think it was also a season where we changed some players. I think we fought back well in the season. We still won 2 titles, so we had some good games. We built up for the season after that. So I think it was certainly not the best, but it was still a good season we had that season.
In the summer of 1994, Rangers go and sign Brian Laudrup. Did you know at that time that your position in the team was under threat, and that would probably be your last season? When you see Brian, your very first impressions of him,
he
was special.
At Rangers, it's a big club. Rangers is a big club, especially at that time. There's a lot of competition for places, so your position is always under threat. If you don't perform, somebody else will step in. It happened with Mark Walters, it happened with Dale Gordon, it happened with Mikhailichenko, Trevor Steven, and then at that time Laudrup came. But strangely enough, in that 94-95 season, I played most of the games, even though I was on a month-to-month contract, because we couldn't agree. Walter was a little bit angry with me, because in an interview the year before, I said that maybe I should, if the contract's not good, if I not play every game, then maybe I should leave to another club. And Walter read that. There was an interview in Holland, but Walter read it. He was not happy, so he didn't want to offer me a contract, but he also didn't want to let me go for free. So we agreed to month-to-month contract. So the whole 94. From August till in January 95, when I left to Japan, I played all these months of month-to-month contract, and it was maybe the best period for myself at Rangers. And it was also at the same time where Laudrup played. So I think it was a very different team, and a different balance in the team, but it worked very well because Laudrup was very difficult to pinpoint down for the opponent's defense, and I did more of the hard work to balance the team. I think it worked well. So even with Laudrup together, it felt very natural for me, and the team improved a lot again. And I think in the end it felt also. I made the step to Japan. That was interesting. But also it was at the same time it was also a little bit sad to leave Rangers, especially at that moment where I played a lot. I felt important, but that's how it goes sometimes in football. And I can only look back at the very great time I had at Rangers, and very proud of having been part of the club and from that team also. So. That's how it goes, but that's how it is.
Peter, we'll return to talk about Rangers a wee bit more towards the end of the podcast. I'd like to ask you a wee bit more about maybe your favourite goals and things like that. But before you would leave on your final game, you scored 2 goals at Brockville. And then back in those days, there was no internet. So I always remember as a young boy, I think we won 3-2 at Brockville. Pieter Huistra scored twice, and then it came on the radio to say that you were leaving, and it came as a huge shock. Obviously, there's no internet, there's no gossip the way it is these days. What was your thinking behind your move to kind of Hiroshima, and why Japan? And was it just a perfect end towards your Rangers career?
It was certainly a good game to finish at Rangers. If you scored two, I remember that the supporters took me on the shoulder a little bit. They gave me very nice goodbye, and that was special. At that time, Japan was very hot. All the top players from the World Cup in '94. They went to Japan. The J League was very well promoted, marketed, because Japan wanted to host the World Cup in I think it was 2000 or 2002. I think 2000. So they make a lot of advertisement for the J League, and they bring in a lot of good players. So it was an honor also to be asked. I played for one of the best clubs in Japan. Wim Jansen, later the Celtic manager, he was the coach. He asked me personally. He came to Glasgow. He spoke to me. He really wanted me, and so that was also very flattering to be asked in that way. And yeah, then because of the contract situation at Rangers, they agreed with the club about the fee, and I went for 2 years to Japan. And at that time, it was also a good experience because, all the big players were there. All the big players from Brazil, all the big players from Germany. They played in Japan at that time, so it was a hot league to play in, and it was a different experience, of course, but also an experience that I cherish a lot. So, but also good, yeah.
Japan different to Glasgow, Peter? Just a wee bit?
Oh yeah, a lot different. They didn't have the same history, of course, behind it. Football in Japan, more or less, professional football in Japan, more or less started at that time. I think it was 2 or 3 years before that it started. In Japan, also the supporters are very supportive, but not as fanatic at that time as they are in Europe, especially in England and Scotland, with all the history behind it. And the history also is always a big part of the aura of a club, and that's something you see at Rangers. That sometimes some things you see at the big clubs all throughout Europe. The history is very important, and that was different in Japan. But you felt that also there was a lot of support for football, and but in a different way. So yeah, it was good to experience, but different. Yeah.
So you would go back to Holland with Groningen, and then you would have 3 years at Lierse, and then you would begin to move into coaching. Can you talk us through your move, obviously, into coaching, and how much of your experiences under all your different managers did you take in and influence your early coaching career?
Yeah, to be honest, till I moved to Japan, I never thought much about being a coach. But when I was in Japan, Wim Jansen was the head coach. He asked me to come. I was the only Dutchman at that time there. We had a player from the Czech Republic. We had another player from Norway, and we had a player from South Korea. That was the foreign contingent at that time. But Wim Jansen was there alone. He had 2 assistants from Japan, and they were supposed to translate, but they spoke very bad English. So that frustrated Wim a lot, and because he's crazy about football. He wants to talk about football. He wants to explain football. He wants to discuss football. He breathes, he talks, he eats, he drinks football. So we traveled a lot because the distances in Japan are a lot bigger than in Scotland. If you have an away game, you're 3 days away, like you go to a European game. If you play 2 away games in a row, you're 6 days away, so you don't come back home. So we spent a lot of time together, and he always talked about football, and he more or less planted the seed to think more about football, to talk more about football, to understand the training sessions he gave. He asked feedback how I felt that the training was going. That did I understand what he was trying to say? Hey, because he had the communication. English, Japanese was not very good at that time, and he had to really communicate through his exercises and training how he wanted the team to play. So it was very interesting, and that's, I think, where I started to be interested into coaching. And when I came back in Holland, I started already when I was playing, I started to do my courses. First the C license, then the B. Later in Belgium, I finished the A license and the Pro license. So I did it all when I was still a player. And when I was finished as a player, that's why it was very easy to go on as a coach after that.
You've had spells at 2 or 3 different clubs in Holland, Peter. I wanted to ask you about your time at Ajax. Not that long a time, but I'm assuming a very interesting time in terms of the players that you work with, like Eriksen and Suarez. How do you coach such natural talents, and how much did you enjoy working alongside guys of that high caliber?
Yeah, of course, that's always good, and especially in Holland, Ajax is the standard. So it was, for me, it was a very, very good to be able to work there. I did the pro license course together with Van Basten. He was the head coach at that time. So when one of his assistants fell away, then he asked me to step in. So I became his assistant at that time. It was not the most easy season in the Ajax history, but we had some very good talent. And one of them was Suarez, who came from Groningen. He had to find his way. At that time, we had Klaas-Jan Huntelaar. It was also a good player. They both wanted to play as a striker, so we had to massage the whole situation. Sometimes Suarez played on the right, sometimes they played together. So we had a lot of issues how you manage top players that year. It was very interesting. I learned a lot in that season, and unfortunately, the season didn't turn out as successful as everybody expects at Ajax, because they expect Ajax to win every year. But that's why Van Basten left after that season, and I became the reserve team coach at Ajax. Also very, very interesting, because then all the young talents are in your team, and was also, for my experience as a coach, a very interesting year.
We have seen once again in the last couple of years how good the Ajax youth system is in terms of the players that they have brought through and had success with and then sold on. That's really the model that clubs like Rangers really have to try and follow. Is that something that you hope and you believe that Rangers can get to that level? Is the talent there in Scotland, and 2, do you think Rangers have the infrastructure and the ability to have a similar setup compared to the one that Ajax have?
Yeah. I think you don't have to be a professor to see that for clubs as Rangers, that this is the only way to go. You have to get your own talent, you have to raise your own talent, you have to develop your own talent. I know I've been at the academy. There is talent at Rangers, but now they have to develop it, and that's the only way. You have to take like Red Bull Salzburg, like the Portuguese teams, like the Dutch teams, like the Belgian teams. There's only one way to have a shot at the top in Europe. That's by developing your own players, because financially you can never buy the best players anyway. So you can never fight the Spanish clubs. You can never outsmart on the transfer market the English clubs, the German clubs. They're all fast. Only thing you can do is to do smart scouting. That's what some clubs in Europe do. They're very smart in picking up players who are undervalued. They pick them up at the right time. So they have to have a very good scouting in place, and otherwise you have to have an academy, and that's one of the things Rangers I think has. Rangers is a big name in Scotland, so all the talent in Scotland should be at Rangers. If you have a good program, they should be at Rangers, and they should be developed by Rangers. They should break into the first team at Rangers. They shouldn't leave before that to go to England or to other clubs. And that's always a difficulty, of course. You even see it now on the English clubs that they lose players from their academy, young players. They lose to German teams now. So you also have to be able to adapt constantly to the changing market in Europe, and you have to be clever. You have to have a philosophy in how to develop talents, how to bring talents to the first team, when to sell the talents, the good players. And maybe you can find some underrated players at other parts of Europe. So I think there's still a possibility for the smaller countries, for the clubs, the top clubs from smaller countries to do something in Europe. And Ajax showed it, the Portuguese teams show it now and then, Red Bull Salzburg shows it. So I think that's the examples also Rangers can follow.
It is a few years now since you have left Holland and you've went back out to the Far East to work, and now you find yourself in Uzbekistan alongside Shota Arveladze. How is Shota to work alongside, and how much of your time do you spend talking about Rangers and reminiscing about your respective times at Rangers?
Yeah, we never met before we met each other in Uzbekistan, so we still have a similar path in our careers. We both played or worked at Ajax. We both worked or we played at Rangers, so we have good topics to talk about, and whatever happens at these clubs, we certainly discuss. And it's nice to be able to share that also. Because if you never played for the Rangers, it's difficult to share the feeling you have about that club. But we did, so it's easy to share it, and it's nice. We both appreciate that time. We both appreciate the whole atmosphere, the people around the club. So yeah, that's a good thing to have in common, and that makes also working together easier, I think, because we have the same opinion about football. We have the same play. Also got the Dutch germ, the dominating football. The Dutch school always advocates. We do that now here in Uzbekistan. We built a team, I think, from Paktikor, where we work now. We always used to be the top. The last few years before we came, they went down a little. When we took over, they were number 8 in the table and last on the treble. So we made a good progress, and built a nice team, and also play in a style that is almost the same as good Ajax teams always did. A lot of pressure on the ball when we don't have it, a lot of domination when we have the ball. So yeah, that's good.
Just finally from me, Peter, what does the future hold for you in terms of your coaching and your management? Where do you see yourself going, and do you ever think you could be back in Scotland as a boss?
I can certainly see myself as a manager in Scotland. That's one of the things I have in my mind already for a long time. I even applied for a few vacant positions, but I'm sure that in the future someday there's a job for me in Scotland. And in general, I've been a long time now in Asia. I learned a lot. I saw great places. I developed my own philosophy now that is very strongly in whatever I do and think. So I would love to have an opportunity in Europe now to be a head coach, to show this philosophy and really turn a club around in the way I see it. And I practiced this the last few years, first in Japan, and now here in between. I was also a few months I was in Trenčín in Slovakia. We turned it around there, so it works.
Peter, you have been brilliant with your time and coming on and joining us in the podcast, and we thoroughly enjoyed it. For me, as I said, growing up, you were part of my favourite Rangers teams and my favourite Rangers era. And what I like to do when we end this and we get somebody on like yourself is ask you a few quick-fire questions about your time at Rangers. So we'll do that now, if that's okay. And first one we'll go for is your favourite goal for Rangers.
My favorite goal, easy. It's the Bruges away game. A very important goal, and I still, in my memory, I still can feel it. So it's very special, and I'll never forget that one.
Favorite teammate at Rangers?
Ooh, that's very difficult because we're all good friends of each other. I always, my roommate was David Robertson, so we were close. We did a lot of things together. So I would probably name him then.
Well, that's good because we're recording with him soon. So he's next on the podcast, so we'll tell him you spoke well about him. So that's good. Favourite funniest moment in the dressing room or during your time at Rangers, that you can share with us?
There were a lot of funny, every day was funny and that was probably also why it was always great to go to the club because it was always funny, but one thing I have to name. These are the things I'm not very good in, these kind of memories. I can remember situations in games, but I can remember laughing, but why I was laughing, I don't know exactly. So to name something, difficult for me.
I suppose a lot of people talk about the dressing room just being full of characters like Durant and McCoist and people like that. It must have been funny working with these guys on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, it's very funny. I remember one thing when we played, I think, a final of the last season, last game of the season where we could win it, and McCoist was out, and he was on crutches, and he came into the dressing room with a big cut-out photo of himself on the back. That was funny.
That was Airdrie away?
I think so, yeah. He was all game, he was walking with himself on the back, taped on his back, on his crutches. That was funny. And one other funny one I remember very clearly. Nobody realized at the moment, but we had to make a team photo. And when the photos were ready to see, it was everybody already, it was clear that McCoist was having a cigar in his mouth on the team photo. So they had to redo that photo later on because they couldn't send it away like that. That was also a good one. They had to completely redo the team photo.
I'm sure Walter would have been happy with that.
I think he appreciated it. It was funny. Yeah.
And the final one, Peter, as I said, thank you very much for coming on the podcast. It's been a real treat. Do you have a message for the Rangers support and the Rangers fans that will be listening?
No, yeah, my message probably would be something like, keep supporting the team. Even now that you're maybe in a lean spell, that you have a few years not winning the title, coming back from the lower divisions, keep supporting the team because the good years will come. I'm sure about that. It's always going in cycles. Celtic cycle is almost finished now, and the Rangers cycle can start. Hopefully, already coming season. That would be great. But especially in these kind of situations, a great club needs great support, and I know how loyal the fans are, and I hope that, and I expect that they will be loyal and they will keep supporting the club in all means. Any way they can. I know as a player that even a small gesture from one supporter can already help a lot, and all these small gestures can combined can be a lot of energy helping the players and helping the club in general to move forward. So keep up the support, and and then the good things will come, I'm sure.
Pieter Huistra, it has been such a treat, honestly. I've absolutely loved it. I've loved reminiscing with you. I'd just like to wish you and Shota, obviously, please send our regards to Shota, all the best for the forthcoming season.
Okay, thank you very much, and all the best.
Massive thank you to Pieter Huistra for coming on. I know I've said it a couple of times during that recording, but he really was one of my favourites growing up. Watching that 9-year-old team, watching him on the left, his pace, his ability to finish was unreal. Chris, I'm buzzing after that. I enjoyed that so much. It was he was so good in conversation. What did you make of that?
I thought it was really good. It's actually the first time I've ever spoken to Peter.
So a huge thank you to Pieter Huistra for joining us. I'm buzzing after that. I know I've said it during the recording, but Peter really was one of my favourites growing up. Watching him on the left, he had electric pace, his ability to finish, the goals he scored, the goals he set up. I always remember that goal that he managed to get to the byline and cut it back for Ian Durrant to kind of lash into the top of the net against Celtic. Stuff like that, his pace was unreal. And the trophies he won and things like that. He was brilliant. But that was a great chat, Chris. I really enjoyed that. When we get guys on, all we ask for is openness and honesty, and he was brilliant. How did you enjoy that?
So one of the things that always strikes me when you speak to foreign players that come into Rangers is just how much the club really strikes a chord with them. You expect it from your Scottish guys or your British guys. They know all about the club when they sign up. You get somebody like Peter that came in the early to mid-90s, and even 2 decades on, you can really tell how much Rangers meant to him, not just from a footballing perspective, but he clearly still has an affinity with the club. As a part of as we said right at the start, part of a really successful side, the type of player that's always going to get fans excited and get you off your seat. So I can see why, for the Rangers fans, certainly of that generation, somebody that's held in such high regard, it's nice to see that he still holds those same fans and Rangers in a similarly high esteem.
Yeah, definitely it was. It really was brilliant to speak to him, and another great guest for us. Obviously now, Chris, we're back to our monthly kind of recordings, and we've got some great names lined up, and we just keep going, and hopefully people are enjoying it.
We've had some great names on since the start, and hugely thankful and appreciative of every former player and every former manager that comes on and shares their stories with us and with the Rangers fans. So certainly plenty more to come from us. Get some great names lined up as we hope for the Rangers fans are really enjoying what we're doing.
Yeah, definitely. A huge thanks to everybody that is listening, and also a huge thanks to Stuart Franklin over at Gersnet, who edits all this and makes us sound good. Stuart and Gersnet's support is hugely appreciated. And also to our sponsors, we have 3 main sponsors: Custom Kitchens Factory, the K9 Way, and Slick's Barber Shop, who all sponsor the blog and Instagram and things. But it is KGM Printing who are friends there that sponsor the podcast, and we're hugely appreciative. Please go and check them out. They're going big now. They're got link ups with lots of football teams. They're making badges, teddy bears, all sorts of stuff to do with merchandise for all different teams. And hopefully there'll be a lot more to come from them. They've been brilliant help. So thanks to them. Please go and check them out on Twitter and things there, KGM Printing. And finally from us, on behalf of Chris and myself, on 4LadsHadADream podcast, thanks for listening. Pieter Huistra has been a great guest. A huge thank you to Peter for coming on. And until next time, please ignore the nonsense, the irrelevant, and the noise.